When you have something to share with a friend or family member, how do you communicate it? Do you invite them to lunch? Do you call them on the phone or send them a text? Do you send a message via social media? I was born in 1985. I remember growing up knocking on doors in my neighborhood to see if my friends could come out and play. I remember calling friends on the phone that was attached to the wall in my kitchen and having to talk to their parents first. I also distinctly remember being in middle school when my friend Tom's family got America Online. Shortly after, we were able to communicate with several friends at the same time with Instant Messenger. It was so cool back then, and I got weirdly nostalgic about a few months ago when AOL announced the end of Instant Messenger. I'm now a therapist with over a decade of experience working with all kinds of folks. I've worked in jails in New York City, a residential treatment facility in the country, and with brave kids and adults trying to get by after some pretty horrific experiences. I currently work in a hospital interacting with teenagers who are experiencing some sort of mental health emergency. This means, largely, that they have been thinking about or attempted to take their own lives. Many of them talk about triggering events stemming from social media interactions. Our country recently experienced yet another horrific school shooting. What's perhaps most sad about that statement is that whenever you're listening to this, it's likely to remain relevant and true. While lawmakers are engaged in discussing why solutions won't work, people line up on their sides to shout about the problem on social media. I don't mean to paint life in the age of social media in a completely negative light. It has connected people and ideas in a way that simply wasn't possible a few decades ago. We are seeing folks organize, shine light on important issues, and bring about real change through the power of platforms like Facebook and Twitter. Just over the last year or so, we've seen women's marches, Black Lives Matter and DACA protests, and the Me Too movement. The way that we communicate with people has certainly changed over the years, and I often wonder how interactions in the age of social media has influenced our mental health and sense of community. The show today is about trying to get a sense of the current state of social media in our lives. My name is Chris Morandi, and this is Old Cove Road.
If I told you what I'm really thinking, you wouldn't listen for long. Yeah, you'd ask me if I'd been drinking. No, I tell you, you couldn't be more wrong.
So when I started to think about this topic, I did what everybody else does. I Googled it. One of the first articles that came up was entitled How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love Social Media by Kathy Stevenson. It turns out Kathy is a lifelong and very accomplished writer who decided to take the leap and found a whole new community and audience for her work. I reached out to Kathy after reading the piece she wrote. I asked her about her initial fears and worries, jumping in, and when she realized that social media was a good thing. Here's Kathy.
I guess I was kind of afraid of it, in a way. I didn't have the confidence to do it because I'm too old or I'm, I'm just not cut out to do that Twitter thing or whatever, But I just thought, I just have to try it. I just have to do it. Either that or I might as well just sit here and, I don't know. I wasn't moving along with the way the world was moving. And I didn't like that feeling. So I just decided to learn how to do it and jump in, and I've loved it. I really have. It's been really fun.
Yeah. So I've talked to lots of folks, both young and old, about social media, and actually I am 32 years old, and I only have had Facebook for, about 6 months now. I think I'm probably one of the only people in my generation who was a holdout for that long, but I eventually caved because it was very difficult for me to know what was going on, for me to see what was going on in terms of events, those kind of things.
Right, good point.
And so most people I've talked to have been negative or jaded when it comes to getting on social media and using social media and what it's all about. But you seem to love it. Tell me what you love about it.
Well, as I said in my brevity essay, I love the fact that it's a community that you can access immediately, because writing is so solitary, which I love that aspect of it, the solitariness, because I'm kind of a loner at heart, but I also love the community of writers, and I love the community of readers. I just love knowing that people are reading what I write. So this is like a community of people that I have no idea who they are. Some of them I really probably never want to know, but those are very few, the ones that write kind of strange comments. But that's a little disconcerting in itself. But, you don't have to make an appointment to meet at Starbucks, or you don't have to, even get dressed. You can just be in your pajamas, and you have this community that you have immediate access to, which is what I really like about it. It's, at first I thought it would be more self-promotion of my work, which obviously it's good for that, but it really didn't end up being about self-promotion for me. It really is about that kind of invisible group of cheerleaders that you feel like they're all kind of like you, and you're all cheering each other on, which is really the aspect that I like about it the best.
Kathy went on to talk about discovering new writers and developing a new perspective on writing. Although she says she's received her fair share of ridiculous and crude comments, overall her experience has been much more positive than expected. Immediately after talking with Kathy, I was feeling pretty positive and even maybe a little less jaded. After reading Kathy's piece, I ran into another article by Scott Joy. Scott is a self-described minimalist and the founder of Revolution Consulting. In his article, he talks about reluctantly joining Twitter to keep up with the young folks, and after a couple short years, he was beginning to feel consumed, stressed, and frankly, pretty miserable. Here's Scott.
So my story is, I watched, as everyone did, the development of social media. Without setting up an account, I went around and looked around a little bit at what it offered, and at the time, I don't know, this was, 20, 15 years ago, I just felt that it wasn't for me. I felt it was actually a little bit creepy to me as far as privacy goes, and I still feel that way today. So fast forward to 2015, and I used to be a club DJ in my 20s, and in my late 40s I started again. And because of that, a lot of people put a pressure on me, if you will, to say, hey, how are you going to keep in touch with us? And I said, well, I'll see you there. You can email me. Here's my phone number. Well, I was the old guy all of a sudden. So in 2015, I started my first Twitter account. That's what I chose to use. I particularly believe Facebook is very creepy to me and the privacy issues. So for 2 years, I ran a Twitter account. I put all my effort into it. I think I'll clarify what that means. You try to get followers. You try to put out good content. Sometimes you put out silly content, and you look for the delete button going, why did I do that? But I put all my effort into it, and I realized that as I've met people, I go to Boston where I interact with other DJs and music people, and I would meet them at the club or wherever, and they'd say, oh, how do I get in touch with you? So I have a website. I'd give them my website, but that's not good enough. They're a little younger than me. Oh, no, you're Facebook. And I would say politely, I'm sorry, I don't participate in Facebook, but I got Twitter. So what would happen is they'd follow me, and I'd follow them, and then I'd get to see their stressful life or their life, whatever it was. And I got to realize that there's no real meaning, and it's only creating anxiety in me. And the anxiety is because I'm seeing this on a screen. I'm not experiencing naturally, organically in any way. And I think there is some value to that. So if it sounds like I'm completely dismissing social media, honestly, in my life I am. But I do see for most people what the somewhat of the value is. I compare it like this. You can go to a fast food restaurant, pick one, let's say McDonald's, and you can get a 99-cent hamburger and fries and a soft drink. Or for $15, you can go to a natural organic place and have a nice meal. Both of them are meals, but after one of them, you've just eaten junk. You're just taking in a lot of junk. The other one actually sustains you in its quality. And that's how social media is to me. It's the fast food, quick hit, as opposed to real life, which actually you actually have meaning. You can see body language. You can hear vocal tones, and it's meaningful. So if you eat a diet of memes and pictures of people's dinners and their new girlfriend or boyfriend, you see that and you're thinking, gee, you do a comparison in your mind, you can automatically start comparing, you automatically start judging. But yes, if you have a steady diet of that, it will tend to make you do one of two things. Either feel like you're not enough, in other words, lead to depression, or you will start creating a false self. And that false self will be, well, I mean, I've actually seen examples. I don't know anybody who did this, but I've seen examples where the younger people, and you deal with them, that's what you do, they will actually put on a false self, a fake girlfriend, a fake boyfriend to look good. And that gets very dangerous. It's quantity versus quality. And a large quantity of anything is not good, even if it's a vitamin. And just on my way over here, Chris, to the park. I'm in my park in my town. I pass so many people on their phone, but just in the park, there's phone zombies walking around on their phone, and I don't want to be rude, which I would appear to be if I asked them this, but I want to say, look at, it's 74 degrees here in New Hampshire. It's no humidity, a little wind, beautiful day in the park. What are you doing? Like, why can't that wait?
The premise of Scott's article was that there's a lot of mental health benefits to going on a social media cleanse. Scott talks about being more relaxed, less anxious about being liked and accepted, and being more present in his real life. I asked his thoughts on if there was a way that he could use social media in a more healthy way.
People have told me, because now I'm in the subject, since I've quit social media, there's been a lot of people who are, what do you mean you quit? And they're in shock. And they come to me and go, how can you do that? It's such a good tool. And I thought to myself, that's a really good way to look at it. It's only a tool. So I can't handle that tool, apparently, because I spent hours. And so I told my wife, I said, if social media is a tool, do you ever see carpenters walking around with a drill in their hand every day, just going up to screws, just tightening them?
Of course not.
So it's not a tool in the way it's used. However, I do believe it is a tool. So to answer your question, there's value if you can control it. Just like in my life, I found out through a series of events that I'm not very good at stopping my beer intake at 3 or 4 beers. I just simply, just like social media, I said enough. And I've noticed some huge benefits from it. That's how social media can be, because once you put it on your phone, especially, it's left your computer. Now it's in your hand. Now it's with you at the restaurant when you're out with your wife and family. And so I believe that you have to be extremely deliberate in order to use it as a proper tool.
If you're enjoying the show so far, click that subscribe button on Apple Podcast or wherever you're listening. Also, giving the show a positive review helps people find it easier, and honestly will do wonders for my ego. I've referenced a few articles so far, and we'll talk about a couple more coming up. Visit oldcoveroad.com for details and to connect further with today's guests. After browsing the internet, reading people's thoughts and feelings on blogs and other websites, it's clear that social media is affecting us. I'm just not sure it's for the good. The question about our mental health is unclear. Some folks talk about being better able to express themselves through the safety of anonymity and online communities of people with similar interests and struggles. Others talk about in detail the feeling of loneliness and being consumed in a world that doesn't feel real. In regard to our sense of community, the definition is changing. Community no longer exclusively means family, neighborhood, or your town. Online communities include people from all over the world finding each other based on common interest. With a variety of thoughts and opinions from folks online, I thought it would be important to take a look at some research. While social media research is relatively new, many researchers have dived in. Lucky for me, my college still allows me to have access to online journals. I know it's a bit nerdy. From how people use Twitter, to emotions elicited from Instagram, to specific causes of FOMO, there's a wide variety of topics being explored. I came across several articles by Dr. Erin Vogel. Dr. Vogel has been researching the effects of social media for several years. I reached out to her and she was kind enough to join me on the pod. With over 1 billion people using social media platforms, it's definitely a thing. Whether it's a good or bad thing, it's all in the way you engage.
So I am currently a postdoctoral fellow at the University of California, San Francisco, but I did my doctoral training at the University of Toledo in Ohio. My background is in experimental psychology. And I got interested in social media through a conversation with my advisor my first year of graduate school. I came into grad school interested in social comparison and social influence in general. So how people compare themselves to others and how that affects how they see themselves, their health behaviors, all sorts of things. So we were talking about how social media gives people this rich information about others that they never really used to get. So whereas people used to know people in their immediate social circles, now we have all this information about people that we barely even know. So we thought that all of this access to all this social information might be changing how people see themselves.
So before we talk about the good and bad of it all, do you think that using social media platforms as a primary way to communicate is changing the way that we talk to each other?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and I think that's something that a lot of people are asking. And I don't really know exactly how that's changing how we communicate sort of on a conversation level. So I don't really know that it's changing really the types of things we necessarily share with each other or how we share that information. But I think that we're communicating with a lot of different people that we might not have before. Mm-hmm. So it used to be that, say, after high school, you might kind of lose touch with everyone except a couple people. Now you can see all the detailed daily lives of all these people that you never really would have talked to otherwise. And sometimes conversations can start through that. Of course, one important thing about any sort of internet or text-mediated communication is that it's a lot harder to pick up on nonverbal cues and things like that. So there can be a lot of misunderstandings. So I know there's been a lot of concern, especially about younger people doing a lot of their communicating through electronic means. And I don't think we really know yet what kind of impact that's going to have, if any.
So it's still unclear if social media is changing the way we're talking to each other, but Dr. Vogel is right about the reach of communication. I was a Facebook holdout for a long time. At this point, maybe I've had Facebook for about a year. I've been able to connect with folks from high school and from childhood, and I have a better understanding of what's going on in terms of events in my community. Sometimes, though, Facebook interactions seem a little superficial or maybe even not real at all. I asked Dr. Vogel if she shared the same thoughts.
What we see on social media about these other people's lives isn't necessarily the whole story, and it's easy for people to forget that. And they're not really posting about all the day-to-day troubles that they have and things that worry them. It's usually pretty positive. So a lot of the research has shown that that's where some of these problems come from.
I think everyone knows on some level that interacting with folks on social media platforms can be a little disingenuous, mostly because we're not getting the full picture that we may get when interacting in person. So, what makes it so sticky?
It's a good question. I think some of it is the social reinforcement. So it's really easy to post a picture or a text post or anything really and just get a bunch of likes and comments on it very quickly. Especially for younger people, if their friends are active in social media all the time. I mean, they can post a selfie or something and get 30 likes on it within an hour. Yeah. And that I think be really reinforcing to people and almost addicting in a way, and that it's just so easy to get those concrete indicators that, yes, somebody thinks I'm attractive or likes what I'm doing or thinks I'm funny. I mean, I think we all crave that, and it's just so easy to get that on social media. And I also think in terms of browsing, which is really what a lot of people do, is just kind of browse through social media without posting. I think there's just something interesting about getting to peek into the lives of people that we don't really know that well. I mean, even if they're really pretty ordinary people by all accounts, there's still something interesting about being able to look into their lives, especially celebrities, but also just normal people.
So I'm a therapist by trade, and I often wonder the impact things have on our mental health. With over 1 billion people using social media platforms, it's got to have an impact, right?
Oh, definitely. I think in several different ways. I know Facebook did a really controversial experiment a few years ago where they were showing people different types, and so it was from their social network, but they were either prioritizing positive posts or negative posts from people's friends on their newsfeed to see how that influenced their mood and the types of things that they would post. And that was controversial for a lot of reasons, but they did find some influence that people, when they were seeing negative posts, then they tended to post more negative things themselves. I haven't read it in a while, but I believe that's what their results were. But there have been other studies, too, showing similar things. A lot of times when people spend a lot of time just browsing on social media, they tend to feel kind of sad and empty afterwards, and that's thought to be linked to partly to this idea that they didn't really do anything productive during that time. They weren't really communicating with people or doing something useful. They were sort of just browsing through, which can be fine, but a lot of people, if they spend a lot of time doing that, tend to feel bad about that. And also just seeing other people's lives appear to be perfect on social media. Like I mentioned, people tend to post the best aspects of their lives and the things that they're proud of. So if we forget that there's all these other things going on behind the scenes that people aren't so proud of, then that can make us feel worse about ourselves and temporarily be in a worse mood as a result.
Yeah, well said. Are there any ways that folks can use social media to improve their mood?
Oh, yes, definitely. I think social media can be a wonderful outlet. It can connect people, like you mentioned with telehealth, it can connect people to services or to others who are going through the same thing that they might not have otherwise had access to. In the lab that I'm working in now at UC San Francisco, what we do is we look at interventions to help people quit smoking using social media. So that's one example of sort of how it can be used for good. We give people these supportive Facebook groups that are confidential where they can discuss things with other smokers who are trying to quit. We give them sort of information, motivational messages, help them to quit, build their motivation. So social media definitely can have some major benefits. I feel like I spent the first few years of my career looking mostly at the downsides of it, but that's certainly only half of the story. And I think it's about harnessing those benefits and doing what we can with it to make something really good.
More broadly, are there ways social media has made the world a better place?
I think so. I think it's made us more connected, which can be really great. I mean, they don't always seek out viewpoints that are different from their own, of course, but that option is there. It can expose us to a lot of different kinds of people and a lot of different kinds of information. Social media can also just be a really good source of social support, and a lot of people do say that even if they don't feel like they have a lot of support in their real life social network, they might know people online that they don't know in real life, or just feel more comfortable talking to their friends online about difficult things rather than face-to-face. So I think social media can really bring people together and can really do a lot of good in the world too.
So I work with lots of teenagers with a lot of different issues, and parents sometimes say to me, they're going through so much stuff, and the issue is that they spend too much time on their phone. If we just took away their phone, there wouldn't be so many issues. They're addicted to their phone. That's what's causing all the problems. What do you think about phone addiction, social media addiction, those things?
Yeah, there's a little bit of it, and of course that's controversial. Some people use the term addiction, some people don't. Mm-hmm. There is actually even a measure that it's only 6 questions, and it measures people's addiction to social media. And the way that the questions are worded, it sounds similar to a questionnaire about alcohol or drug abuse. So there are attempts to sort of get at this idea that when some people, not everyone, when they use social media, they want to use it more and more. They get anxious if they don't have access to it, and it really can be a negative coping mechanism for them. So that does seem to be an issue for a lot of users, and I think that's also something that we need more research on and need to kind of come to a consensus on, because it can be a big problem.
Yeah, that makes sense. With that said, if you were advising a 16-year-old on how to best use social media in the most healthy way, what would you tell them?
I would say don't believe everything that you see on social media. Try to remind yourself that these are people just like you, even celebrities, and they all have the things that aren't great about their lives too. So I think that's really, really important for everyone to keep in mind. I would also say that it's really important to take steps to not let people bully you on social media. That's a huge issue, especially among teenagers, is that it's just so much easier for people to say really mean things when they're not saying it to somebody's face. And usually on most social media platforms, there are ways to block people who are harassing you, or of course, tell an adult and deal with it that way. And then last, just using social media in moderation is really important. It can be a really good addition to our social lives, but it shouldn't take over our social lives. So it's still really important to get out and spend time with friends face-to-face if you can, rather than only spending all your time on social media.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I'm going to have to refer parents to you. So maybe my last question is, since you are a researcher, where do you think the research field goes from here? You said there's a lot of things we don't know currently. What are you looking into? Where does the field go next in terms of researching the effects of social media?
In terms of resources and time and logistics to do longitudinal studies where we're following people over a long period of time. So what we can do is we can bring people into a lab and show them some social media posts and measure how they respond to it right away. And that's what a lot of my work has done. Or we can ask people questions about their social media use in general and sort of how they feel in general and how they think. And we can draw some tentative conclusions from that, but we don't really have a good idea of what happens long term when people are using social media, especially younger people. I get a lot of questions about how this is affecting kids, how they're spending so much time on social media, and how that's going to affect them long term. And the answer is we just really don't know yet. And I think that's something that we need a lot more of.
Well, Dr. Erin Vogel, thanks so much for chatting with me, and thanks for coming on Old Cove Road.
Ew, great to talk with you.
Just a few things before we wrap up. The Reads page at oldcoveroad.com is filling up with inspiring folks talking about their mental health struggles and sharing their tips for living a healthy life. You should definitely check it out. Finally, I want to thank Corey Page and the boys from Candid for allowing me to use their music on the pod. I named this podcast experiment after the street I grew up on, and there's no music that reminds me of home more. You can check them out at coreypage.com and at candidmusic.com as well.